master of mankind, sits on the golden throne. One of his eyes is missing, his back is snapped in two, and the black blood runs from his mouth in slow streams. Fans have argued for 40 years over how strong he truly was at his peak, and across 5 novels in the Horus Heresy series, the answer came out in pieces that cut against the legend most fans grew up with. Long before any of that, he walked among people in secret. The novel The Master of Mankind placed his earliest years in a time before written history. The species had no idea what lived beside them. Sagittarius, an ancient custodian interred in a dreadnought, carried memories that reached back to the Thunder Warrior age. The veteran spoke of the Golden Lord as he once was, not as he became. Slow shaping had taken place across thousands of years. Adding a small piece to that timeline, the book Buried Dagger recorded an even older event. Long before any Imperium, a poison-soaked war on old Earth nearly wiped out every form of life on the planet. The figure who ended the war did not yet carry the title fans knew him by. He had not yet become what he would become. By the time he claimed his most famous title, he had already lived 1,000 lives. His voice during those buried centuries followed a strange rule. His presence often overrides ordinary speech and hearing, with witnesses receiving his meaning directly through their minds. Sound carried on air had little to do with the way he spoke. His words traveled mind to mind. Audiences walked away knowing exactly what he had said, even when no two of them shared a tongue. His face followed the same rule. Witnesses across his long life described him in different ways. One observer saw a young king. Another saw a hooded old man with blood on his lips. A third saw a knight crowned with laurels. A fourth saw a barbarian warlord. Returning to the Webway novel, the writing explained the gap. His form shifted in the eyes of different observers, especially in moments of psychic intensity. No two pairs of eyes saw him quite the same way. When he finally stepped out of the dark and showed himself, he started building. Returning to the Thousand Suns storyline, the writing described his first attempt at a soldier program, the Thunder Warriors. They were earlier proto-legionary creations, less refined than the Astartes who would come after them. Most went mad. Recognizing the limit, the Golden Lord moved past them. He needed something better, an army that stood as far above the Thunder Warriors as those warriors stood above ordinary men. The most ambitious gene project in human history followed. Combining recovered ancient science with the best minds of the Red Planet's priesthood, he produced the Primarchs, 20 beings whose like can never be made again. Speaking to his sons during their growth in the labs, he shaped them as science built them. Even the unborn could hear him, with Magnus the Red speaking with his father while still inside the growing chamber. When the project itself fell apart, with the growing tanks attacked and the infants scattered across the warp, the Golden Lord made another call, choosing to trust he could find them again, rather than destroy them all to start over. He admitted later that he still did not know if that had been the right call. Walking the cleanest gene stocks on old Earth himself, he tested family lines for the markers he needed. Arman, the chief librarian of the Thousand Suns, said outright that his own people's blood was clean. That was why the Golden Lord picked from them. He designed science. He scouted the recruits. He raised the unborn. Nothing moved without him touching it. He built his sons by hand. Then he admitted he had no idea if he had been right to keep them. People close to him doubted what he really was even then. A woman named Koja Zu argued that the Golden Lord was a relic from the Dark Age before history, a weapon left out of its box and now running loose. Constantine Valdor, his chief custodian, neither agreed nor denied it. Arkan Lan, the Mars genius who saw him in his private workshop, looked at the gold-armored figure and saw something different from what most people saw. Lan saw a scientist first, not a warlord. The same source had the gold-armored ruler himself wave away any father's love for the Primarchs, calling them tools he had grown to serve a purpose. The man worshipped as the savior of the species said he had no sons, only weapons. While the soldier programs ran, he had already found something bigger under his own city. The book The Buried Dagger confirmed that secret underground spaces and webway-linked passages ran beneath the Imperial Palace, built by a long-dead, non-human race. Uncovering those tunnels, the silent ruler quietly began turning them into the foundation of his real plan. That plan, has a clear name. Humanity had begun evolving into a psychic race. Untrained witches worked as beacons that drew warp predators. The Eldar before humans had faced the same problem and solved it only halfway, weakening their warp connection without breaking it. He meant to break humanity's connection completely. Every other piece of his empire fed back into that one project. The Crusade, the Astartes, the Imperial Truth, the Black Ships, and the Sisters of Silence all served the same purpose. The same source pulled the design together with one line, spoken by the man himself. Tyranny was not the goal. Total control was the means. The goal was serving humanity from the warp forever. His personal guards came out of the same logic. The Astartes were ordinary humans cut open and given false organs, copying the result of better work through surgery and ritual. The Custodes he built differently. Their bodies were reshaped at the deepest level, with perfection threaded through their blood and grown into their bones from the start. Fighting as individuals rather than as squads, they answered first and last to one man, with their primary loyalty fixed on the Golden Lord rather than any Primarch. Working on the other side of the same problem, the Sisterhood drained the Imperium's power before it could feed demons. Described as nothing in the form of something, a void wearing the shape of a presence, the Silent Woman served as its quiet hand for witch harvests, demon hunting, and secret work too dark for the Imperial Truth to admit. Returning to the buried Dagger storyline, the writing added another piece. Anti-witch vaults lined with phase iron sat under the throne world. 3 groups alone could pass certain depths under the Imperial Palace: his custodians, his silent sisters, and him. Every guard around him was built to fight a war he had not yet told them was coming. While the structure took shape on Old Earth, he went hunting in person. The novel 8,000 Suns described how the gold-armored ruler blew the warp itself alongside the Crimson King. The 2 crossed reefs of broken matter and depthless chasms of fire that would have driven any other mind insane. Fighting nameless creatures, they felt the shadow of entities so large the human imagination cannot picture them. For him, walking the warp was something he had done the way a soldier walked a battlefield. That experience came with one clear limit, at least in the eyes of his own son. Magnus believed his father had bargained with the great warp powers in ages past, and he believed he had never dared face one directly. Lesser demons that traveled in their shadow, he had killed in numbers. The biggest powers in the universe, by the gifted son's reading, he had only made deals with. When the Great Crusade finally launched, the scale of his mobilization spoke for itself. The same source described more than 7,000 fleets lifting from the skies of Old Earth at once, with 100,000 legionaries cheering as the world they were leaving wept beneath them. Bringing in the opening book of the storyline, Horus Rising, the next stage took shape. 200 years of war followed, with the Silent Ruler in personal command at the front. The same novel listed the work he was credited with by then, including the joining of the Throne World under one rule, the agreement with Mars, the Astronomicon that lit every interstellar route, and the Space Marine legions themselves. Every single one of those bills carried his personal signature. Side moments during the campaign revealed the depth of his knowledge. One scene showed Imperial searchers finding a vast chart on a dead world, 20 meters across and unrecognizable to anyone in the room. Walking in, he named it instantly as a perfect map of the Throne World from an age long gone, before the rise of the great hive cities. The men around him could not see what he saw at a glance. His foresight had already been working since before the first ship lifted off. Returning to the buried Dagger novel, the writing recorded that his inner sight had opened to the threats waiting in the void before the Crusade ever began. The campaign itself was a response to what he saw. He knew what was coming. He had built his entire empire to meet it. He had seen the war coming, and he had built his entire empire to fight it. One battle during the early campaign showed his personal combat ceiling. The book The Buried Dagger described a scene on the death world of Barbarous, ruled by overlords who used a killing fog to keep humanity in slavery. Mortarion, then a young Primarch, had spent his life trying to reach the Citadel of Nikaea, the master who had raised him. The toxic mist always stopped him before he could climb high enough. Arriving in shining armor, the gold-armored ruler moved through the fog without slowing. Swinging his sword once, he ended the High Overlord with a single stroke. The body never even hit the ground, coming apart into dirty ash and blowing away on the wind. Nikaea had stood as the strongest tyrant of an entire planet. Mortarion, a Primarch operating at his ceiling, could not beat the Dark Lord alone. The same novel described the gold-armored figure in close-up, standing at least as tall as any son of his, wearing a heavy plate that moved on him like cloth, and carrying a blade tall enough to look like a statue on its own. Meeting a Death Guard veteran soon after, the warrior felt his legs tighten on instinct. He almost dropped to one knee without choosing to, sensing that what stood in front of him was a small piece of something much larger. His mere presence carried weight wherever it landed during those Crusade years. In a single hall scene from the same book, servitors stopped where they stood and dropped to the floor. The air thickened and grew dim. Time itself seemed to slow. Loken, a veteran Astartes captain, tasted the bite of psychic force on his tongue and could not bring himself to look the gold-armored figure in the eye. Quiet talks between him and Malcador the Sigillite happened without spoken words. Two of the strongest minds in the galaxy traded silent thoughts as their normal mode of conversation. Around him, the rules of normal life stopped working. Even at his peak in the Crusade, the campaign had its weaknesses. Going back to the opening book of the series, the writing placed several of them on the page in plain language. Horus Lupercal himself, in a private moment, told the loyal captain that his father did not fully understand the warp. Neither did the favored son. The Imperium was the Imperium's main road and main weapon, and the human galaxy had never mastered it. The Golden Lord used it without owning it. That same talk gave the reason behind his later retirement. Stepping back from the field had nothing to do with being tired. Conquering material space alone would never save humanity. The warp had to be solved. He went home to solve it. The same novel showed cracks forming under his feet long before the rebellion, spreading through the fleet despite his ban on it. The Lectio Divinitatis, an underground religion treating him as a god, kept gaining followers. Even Euphrates Keeler, a remembrancer attached to the favored son's flagship, prayed at her own private shrine. People said his worship would only become real after his death, and since he could not die, the argument capped itself before it started. Returning to the buried dagger source, the pattern grew bigger. Drawing warp creatures to its gathering sites, the Imperial cult produced a kind of psychic radiation that demons could taste from kilometers away. Healer herself was being changed without his instruction, turned into a kind of saint, a living channel for whatever power the worship had attracted. He had banned religion across the galaxy. A new religion grew up around him anyway, building itself out of his own leaked power. His own warriors formed secret brotherhoods against the same rule. Torgadon, a captain in the 16th Legion, said it plainly. Their lord did not understand brotherhood, since he stood too far above the rest of humanity to see it. He had no peers. The Primarchs were sons to him, never brothers. Meeting in secret, the Marines filled in what he could not provide. He could conquer the galaxy. He could not control how his own warriors prayed in secret. The series even hung the entire story on this gap. Speaking from a future where the favored son had killed his father, the very first line of the opening book set the frame for every novel that followed. The strongest being in the galaxy could be killed by his own son. Around the same stretch of years, the Silent Ruler had to deal with a different problem inside another son's legion. The novel 1,000 Sons showed the worst political cost of his secrecy. The Council of Nikaea, called to settle the question of psychic powers in the Marines, was something he never wanted. Political pressure from the Primarchs and Mars factions forced his hand. The unwillingness was clear on his face when he took his seat. His arrival, however, was anything but small. As the Crimson King's Legion translated into the system, a psychic-sighted warrior saw a column of pure light rising from the planet, a beam invisible to mortal eyes, but blazing across systems for those with the second sight. That column was him. Magnus called it a mind that could reach across the galaxy and hold an empire together inside the dream of unity. He had not even arrived yet. Stars away, his mind already lit up the sky. What followed inside the great meeting hall put his sealing on the page. Speaking to the crowd, the gold-armored ruler sent a warm wash of approval through the room. Armand recognized the technique because he used it himself. The chief librarian's own version reached a handful of people. The gold-armored ruler reached thousands at once, while seated, doing it as background work. At the same moment, his gaze locked with Magnus the Red. Sitting pinned to his chair, the Crimson King held his body rigid, his single eye shut tight, his flesh trembling as if currents tore through him. Two displays of power ran at the same time. The most gifted psyker of any son, who had once told a space wolf he could smash whole fleets with a thought, could not move. Trying to fall back into the enumerations, his legion's mental discipline, the chief librarian could not hold focus near the gold-armored figure. The output overpowered the shielding. The ruling at Nikaea banned psychic powers in the Marines, closing his own order with a direct threat. The gold-armored ruler warned that the man who broke faith with him would be his enemy, and he would visit such ruin on him and all his followers that the offender would regret the choice until the end of all things. Magnus heard the warning and waved it off. The same novel tracked the lead up to disaster. The Golden Lord had already refused his son's offer to help with the Webway Project. Even the gifted son, even the Primarch most able to understand the work, could not be told the details. The reasoning was security. The result was that no one inside the legions could measure the stakes when the moment came. He kept his greatest project locked behind his own face. No one knew how fragile it was until it broke. The campaign then peaked at Ulanor. Naming Horus the War Master and announcing his withdrawal to Old Earth, the Silent Ruler turned the crusade over to his son. The hold he carried over his warriors was so total that his departure shook the institution he had built. The War Council itself, once the center of imperial power, dropped to side status almost overnight when a civilian Council of Terror formed to handle the day-to-day work he had no time for. His command structure shifted the moment he stepped back. Once back on the throne world, he locked himself into the Imperial dungeon to work on the Alien Tunnel project. The Imperial Fist, his most loyal legion, took up the role of personal guard around the palace. Going back to the Webway novel, the writing took a toll on that personal guard once he was gone from the front. By that stage of the war, Ra Endymion was the last tribune left. The 10,000 had been built for a war that was now slowly killing them off, with no replacements coming. The same source covered another structural problem of his own making. His own pre-rebellion ruling had blocked the Imperial Fist from entering the underground laboratory. When the Tunnel War later turned bad, his own rule cut off his own reinforcements. Watching him fall silent on the seat, Mars loyalists started cutting their own private deals to fill the empty space. The empire built around one man started to drift the moment that man stopped speaking. The breakpoint came when news of the favored son's turn to chaos finally reached the gifted son. Returning to the novel A Thousand Suns, the writing described the Crimson King's panic. He fired a psychic warning straight through the warp towards Old Earth. The gifted one meant to alert his father. Instead, his sending shattered the wards that had sealed the underground laboratory for 100 years. Thousands of palace staff died from the shockwave. Hundreds more went mad or killed themselves. The same source finally revealed what those wards had been protecting. The chamber was not a prison anymore. It served as a working laboratory hundreds of meters tall and many times wider, full of machines beyond what the best minds of Mars could even identify. The chamber held the work of the most brilliant scientists on the planet. Only one being knew what those machines did. The Golden Throne sat at the center of the room. Its true purpose was not a chair, but a key recovered from ruins beneath an ancient desert, designed to operate the alien tunnel network running under reality. Its dimensional controls and warp filters were the most god-complex hardware on the planet. The Crimson King's panic broke them. Control over the gateway ended. On the other side, void monsters began massing, formless beasts and powers that lived only for destruction. The gold-armored ruler had to plug the hole with himself. In the same scene, the gifted son realized something else with horror. He himself had been the design's intended successor. The plan had assumed that he, not his father, would sit on the seat long-term. A taunting warp intelligence later showed him a horrifying possible fate. A withered figure burned black on a broken chair, bound forever to the soul engine. That image was meant to be the worst of all possible futures. The Crimson King's mistake had just made it the likely one. Word reached the Silent Ruler that his own son had wrecked the project, sending the Space Wolves to Prospero rather than going himself. He let the Gifted One read the decision in real time. From his side, Magnus saw the gathering darkness using the moment, hoping to break two loyal legions on each other's anvil before the coming war. Whether Russ was the right choice or not, the result hurt his own war effort. The Gifted One tried to warn his father. The warning broke the very thing it tried to save. What followed inside the broken chamber became the focus of the book, The Master of Mankind. Sitting on the wounded seat, the gold-armored figure fell silent. His face went still. The forces he fought inside the warp ran beyond what any other character in the storyline could measure. Holding that line meant he could not move, could not speak aloud, and could not appear in any other battle. The Webway fight on the inside, waged to push back the demonic flood, ran without its strongest single asset standing on the field. During those long days on the seat, he reached out to the men around him through visions. The same source showed him giving Ra and Endymion a sweeping psychic image, watching the fall of the Eldar, the rise of Slaanesh, the long darkness called all night, and the slow rise of the Imperium itself. The bodyguard saw it all imprinted directly into his mind. The same scene described another vision. The priest-king of an old throne world kingdom, called Malin Sen, projected so completely into Ra's senses that the warrior felt the wind on his face and smelled the dead through his helmet filters. The silent ruler could even take a man on a tour of his own childhood, showing the bodyguard the moment he first learned that humanity needed rulers. Mid-conversation with Ra, during one quiet moment, his face flickered with pain. Touching all 10 fingers to his face under the weight of a silent burden, he showed his mind being divided in real time. Foresight and the warp defense were competing for the same space. While he held the line of the seat, his most trusted friend was executing plans of his own. Returning to the buried Dagger novel, the warrior Rubio confronted Malcador the Sigillite about it in plain words, accusing him of designing things behind his lord's back. Malcador had conceived the need for a new kind of weapon and brought the design for a legion unlike those that came before it. Program meant to fight demons in a way the regular Astartes could not. Even at the top of the chain, the strongest mind in the Empire had a partner running a separate book. Even his greatest friend had been keeping secrets from him. Stepping out of the bind for a single day required a price. Performing a ritual called the Unspoken Sanction, the Sisters of Silence fed the chair with the lies of 1,000 witches. Their bodies died slowly inside the support pods, none of them peacefully. The cost bought the gold-armored ruler 1 day of free movement. From that point on, his full combat power carried a fuel meter, with 1 day equaling 1,000 human deaths. The math behind every later march onto the field sat in plain view. 1 day on the front cost 1,000 human lives. He was not free anymore. When that day came, he walked into the Webway on foot. Demon ranks broke before he even reached them, feeling his presence as acid eating their skin from the inside. Some fled, some dissolved into nothing before contact. When his sword caught fire with circuit-fed flame, the tunnels themselves ignited, moving at speeds that even his custodians could not track. He appeared behind larger entities with the weapon already buried in their backs. Hurling the sword across the field with a wave of mind force, he called it back through the mist. Each fall of the steel released white flame that burned ghost flesh from false bones. Around him, the battlefield seemed to grow shapes of dead loyal warriors fighting at his side, including silhouettes of Marines betrayed at Isfahan and a giant figure among giants. The 10th son of a dying empire briefly reborn in his father's anger. He spoke to Ra without ever opening his mouth, sending sharp warnings directly into the bodyguard's mind. Be ready, it draws near. To look at him, the source said, was to go blind. To stand in front of him was to die. The deepest test came against a single foe. The same book introduced Draknian, a demon born from the first murder in human history. Named the End of Empires, its name was the act itself, a knife in flesh, and the blood spilled in the first slaying. Drawing on all 4 chaos powers at once, the entity was not bound to any one god. The full circle of dark gods kept it alive, which made it harder to kill than any single greater warp creature. The Imperium sent its best non-master strike force against it: 20 custodians, the sister commander Kroll, 50 Mars war robots, 3 grav tanks, fire-armed elite troops, and the Night Castigator of Baroness Jaya all charged in. Hundreds of lesser demons fell. The first murder did not. Driving blades into its core, Kroll and Ra watched it dissolve, then put itself back together from bone, iron, and machine wreckage. The most elite team the human galaxy could put on the field could not finish the job. Then, the gold-armored figure arrived. Running as a head-on charge, the duel had both fighters sliding in and out of existence. The first exchange ended with 5 spear-length talons standing out of his back. The first murder had landed the first heavy hit. The writing did not soften the wound. Human blood, no matter what later legends said, ran down the broken gold plate, promising him death. The entity got an answer in silent thought speech that perhaps one day, but not today. He never claimed he could destroy the creature, only delay it. A second weapon, a magic bone with screaming faces carved into its steel, ran through him. Pulling it free himself, he cast Dracnian into Ra Endymion. He trapped it inside the bodyguard, locked in flesh, and bound by the man's pain. The limit was clear. The first murder could not be destroyed, it could only be locked away. The cage was held for a long time. How long? No one in the room could yet say. The Webway War ended with a single gesture. Closing his right hand into a fist, the silent ruler watched every generator in the chamber die at once. The mechanisms ruptured from inside. The gateway that had taken centuries to build collapsed into a bare stone wall. Power failed. The Imperial dungeon went black. Cutting himself off from his own life's work to stop the demonic flood, he watched the dream of severing humanity from the Imperium die in that room. His extension into the alien tunnels was gone for good. The greatest project of his career ended when he shut the door on it himself. In the quiet that followed, Diocletian asked him what came next, saying they would rebuild the empire under his guidance. Speaking 3 words no custodian had ever heard from him before, the gold-armored figure answered that he did not know. He even raised the possibility of being gone entirely. The wider plan, the Webway plan that all the institutions of the Imperium had been built around, was finished. The shining path was lost. Around the same hour, the larger war for Old Earth was closing in. The book, The End and the Death, Volume 3, opened the final chapter of the storyline. Looking back on the events afterward, the loyal captain revealed the moral center of the entire rebellion. Al-Person, with the warrior's words behind him, had talked the gold-armored ruler out of accepting a promise of godhood. The reasoning ran simple: better to fight demons as a man than to become one. Giving up the gathering strength that would have let him crush Horus Lupercal without effort, he entered the rest of the war with limited power against an enemy holding endless reserves. The act itself shook reality. Refusing godhood released enough energy to rock creation across the throne world. The negative shape of his decision left a wave that all of Old Earth felt. Whatever he turned down operated on a tier with the worst threats in the setting. He had a chance at godhood. He gave it up on purpose. The rebellion ran on harder rules because of that choice. Paying for the decision up front, he cut away most of his own emotional core in the bargain. Crimes against him could no longer be turned into weapons. Later, when Sanguinius died on the bridge of the Vengeful Spirit, nailed up as a trap for his grief, Horus expected the site to break him. It did not. Loken offered the cleanest summary of the model, stealing fire from chaos and using its heat against it. The silent ruler always knew he could not take the whole flame. The whole flame would burn him hollow. It was not cowardice, it came from supreme will. When the last act came, the gold-armored figure boarded his son's flagship to finish the war. Going back to the final volume of the storyline, the writing described the run through the ship's interior. Demon blood coated every other warrior in his group. It did not stick to his armor at all. A psychic ward around his person physically pushed the contact away. Running down a palace gate-sized greater warp creature at full sprint, he split its head with one stroke and never broke pace. Greater monsters of the Imperium were a warm-up for him. The clash inside the throne room ran on a scale the source described as matter meeting antimatter. When the two fighters first hit each other, the bulkheads of the warship buckled. Walls peeled back, plate armor on both sides crumpled. Material reality and dream warp reality both tore open at the seams. Opening with what should have been a winning move, the favorite son sent a stream of chaos lightning that pinned his father to the floor and burned him from the inside, slowly killing him atom by atom. 3 companions, the loyal captains Sikautis and Lidu, intervened and saved him. Without them, the duel would have ended in seconds. After they bought him the moment, he rose with the white light of a sunrise behind his head. Some of his combat power even flowed into the warriors at his side, with a vestige of that strength staying in Loken himself, and sparks coursing along Rubio's sword long after. 3 soldiers bought their lord enough time to stand back up. The strongest human in history needed help to make it to the second round. Loken set the fight's true scale on the page, running physical, mental, soul deep, and woven across ancient warp arts all at once. The duel played out like 100 fights happening together, Lidu, a Custodes grade observer, could not match the sword speed for long enough to land a single strike without being broken to pieces. The favored son called the sword work itself the kind of art an old Eldari dancer would make. The same volume confirmed the gap between father and son in numbers. Standing nearly twice his father's size, Horus carried an enormous shape of seething war power. Even so, the giant called the gold-armored figure the most powerful human in the galaxy by some margin. He also said, in plain words, that his father's strength had a limit, while his own ran from the bottomless well of the Imperium. The same thought repeated in his head, in different forms. It was not his father's power that won pieces of the duel. It was what the man did with that power. Even the strongest being in the room, gloating over a power gap, openly admitted his father's higher technique. Across the parallel layers, the silent ruler won pieces of the fight. In one part, set in the lost city of Mohenjo-Daro, he took the upper hand. In another, set on Kasr Undak on Cadia, the same. The rest of the favored sons won. The throne room itself, the giant's home battle space, started to flicker as the fight continued. Holding it cost the giant power, and so did fighting his father. The truth was simple. Calling the favored son's bottomless reserves a figure of speech, the source showed a real budget being taxed up to the line. The old four, the Chaos Gods themselves, kept feeding power directly through their puppet across the duel, holding him up from outside. His toolkit during the fight stretched across every craft he had collected, drawing marks in the air that blew up like breaching mines. The gold-armored figure fought a card-by-card duel across a warp tarot, a layer where his son eventually outplayed him. Swapping roles like weapons, he took the shape of an architect, a destroyer, a raven, a steppe horseman, a lion, and a wrong son seeking justice. Pairing his son's swings with pieces of Chthoniya, the favored one's own birth world, he ripped the planet itself across dimensions to use as a shield. He wielded a war sword and a power claw together as easily as a fencer used a rapier and dagger. He used a killing stroke Sanguinius had once tried to land on Horus, the same blow he had taught the angel. He fought his son with the techniques of 1,000 cultures. None of them could finish the job. The bill for those moves came due. Wounds inside the throne room did not heal. Each one bled centuries off his endless lifespan. One blow cut 900 years out of him. Another strike later took more. His longevity was the supply he spent during the fight. Behind him, the situation worsened. Holding the wounded chair in his absence, Malkador was burning out in real time. The daily witch sacrifice ran dry. Believing the seed had been abandoned, Vulcan prepared to detonate a planet-cracking weapon. There was no fallback power source. The silent ruler could not draw from the chair in mid-combat. The win had to be built somewhere else. The same source tracked the chant moving across humanity. Through Keeler, Cinderman, the choirs in the Hollow Mountain, and Dorn's call across the palace, 4 words spread across every human ear that could still hear them. The Emperor must live. The unified will of the species was the shield that would carry him to victory. By the climax, that whisper arrived at full volume. With a whole species standing in the throne room, its will joined into one form. The moment had a clean read. What mattered was not his power, but where it came from. He still could not finish alone. Even with Horus on his knees and beaten, he could not kill him. He did not have the means, not even him. He could not destroy the bottomless thing the favored son had become. The strongest human in history stood over his beaten son. Even then, he could not strike the killing blow. 2 pieces solved the problem. The first was a tool. Smuggling an ancient stone knife across the warp to reach this moment, all person delivered a weapon sharp enough to cut space itself, an edge that awaited a long time for this single use. The second was Loken, the last loyal son of his brother. Shaped by his quiet hand, talked Horus into casting off the chaos power for one moment. Only then did his son become a man again. Only then did the kill become possible. When the moment came, he struck. As Horus briefly set aside the protection of his chaos gifts, a beam of pure white light blasted from the gold-armored figure's one remaining eye, driving the favored son to his knees. Another mind blast through his gaze threw Horus across the infinite angles of the galaxy and split his soul in 2. With Horus reduced to just a man again, the silent ruler drove the stone knife home, channeling the full force of his mind down the blade like lightning through metal. Even with his back broken, his ribs crushed, and his throat torn open, He had enough left to do that. Near death, he had also shattered massive chairs torn from the floor and thrown at him, breaking them apart in midair with sword strokes alone. The killing stroke ended the war. The silent ruler had spent everything to make it happen. The same novel described him afterward in Rogal Dorn's arms, with no heartbeat the Lord of the Imperial Fist could feel. One eye closed, the other is gone entirely. His skin was cold and pale. His arm, his body, and his head were broken beyond what any healer knew how to repair. Lifting him slightly, his Praetorian watched his head fall back, with black blood streaming from his mouth. The moment had a name in the story: the end and the death. He had stopped speaking even mind to mind. The post-duel figure was still and silent. The strongest human in history paid every coin he had to put his son down. The broken sons he left behind kept fighting in the long dark, ranked across 6 levels from strongest to weakest, while a secret order rose to hunt the heretics, witches, and demons he had once held back himself, with the inside story of the Imperium's most powerful order carrying the war forward from there.